This is DW News live from Berlin. Turkey is accused of sending refugees back to Syria against their will. We meet a mother desperate to find her son. Also coming up, China begins events to mark the 70th anniversary of the communist takeover. But will celebrations be overshadowed by unrest in Hong Kong? Austrian conservative Sebastian Kurz looks set to return to power after his party wins parliamentary elections. But it's unclear who he'll form a government with. Support for his former partner, the far-right Freedom Party, has collapsed. And it's a scandal that won't go away. Volkswagen appears in court in Germany to face compensation claims from hundreds of thousands of drivers of diesel cars. I'm Sumi Somaskanda. It's good to have you with us. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan hopes a new safe zone in northeastern Syria will do two things: give him a place to repatriate Syrian refugees and create a militarized area to keep Kurdish militants away from Turkey's southern border. Erdogan had said he was determined to establish this zone by today, the end of September, but his government and the U.S. have different ideas about how big that zone should be. Erdogan says he will act alone if there's no agreement. Now, Syrian refugees in Turkey say some are already being deported back home to areas including the north, which, according to them, are far from safe. Our correspondent Yulia Han met a woman who says her son was sent back against his will.
Mohammed has been gone for almost 2 months. When Ofer Resho thinks about what happened to her son, she feels helpless, lost. In early August, Mohammed was riding a friend's motorbike in Istanbul. The bike wasn't registered. Mohammed was stopped by police and then sent to a detention center.
About 12 days later, I got a call from Mohammed. He said, "They've taken me to Syria, to Idlib." That was his last phone call. I haven't heard from him since. I'm heartbroken. When we fled from Syria, he was still a small child. Now they have sent him back to that place, and I don't know where he is.
Istanbul's Fatih district is an area where many Syrians live. Many here have heard that the Turkish authorities have been deporting refugees in recent months. And most of them are afraid that they could be next.
When they started sending people back, I was so scared I didn't leave my house.
There are more restrictions on us now, and people are being deported back to Syria. We can't escape Turkey for Europe anymore because it's too dangerous.
We Syrians used to feel welcome here, but that has changed. Now we feel like unwanted migrants again.
Turkey has taken in more refugees from Syria than any other country. More than 3.6 million people in the space of a few years. Hundreds of thousands live here in Istanbul. They've set up stores and restaurants. They've tried to build new lives. And while Turkish society initially responded with remarkable resilience, hospitality is now rapidly wearing thin.
They bother us. If more of them come, I don't want to live in this neighborhood and in this country anymore.
I get along very well with most of the Syrians here. There are some bad people, but you get that everywhere.
We want them to leave as soon as possible. We don't want them here anymore.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has recognized this change in public sentiment. In the past few weeks, he has made repeated promises that millions of Syrians will return home to a so-called safe zone that he wants to establish in the northeast of Syria. But the government insists deportations are not taking place, and that Syrians who are returning are doing so voluntarily. Ömer Çakırgöz disagrees. The lawyer is trying to help get Ofer Reshel's son back from Syria. Mohammed and his family have valid Turkish documents and protection status. Çakırgöz has filed an appeal with Turkey's constitutional court.
Sending a person to a war zone is a serious human rights violation. Mohammed is not an isolated case. This is happening to many Syrians. Many have been deported in recent months.
The lawyer says that many deported Syrians attempt to return to Turkey, making a second escape from their war-torn country, illegally and often at a high cost, paying a lot of money to smugglers. And as dangerous as that might sound, Mohammed's mother Ofer is clinging to any hope that she might see her son again in safety.
In China, celebrations are taking place to mark the 70th anniversary of communist rule. The main celebrations will take place on Tuesday with a huge military parade in Tiananmen Square. But Beijing fears the anniversary could be overshadowed by the pro-democracy protests and unrest in Hong Kong.
On the eve of the anniversary, a ceremony to honor the creation of the communist state and the heroes of the Civil War. Chinese President Xi Jinping paid his respects to the fallen. In the evening, he attended a theatrical celebration that recalled China's rise from a nation in despair to the world's second largest economy. October 1st, 1949, Mao Zedong declared the founding of the People's Republic of China and transformed the country. His great leap forward aimed to industrialize the country, but instead left it devastated. Famine was widespread and tens of millions died. Mao's Cultural Revolution followed. Opponents were sent to camps or executed in his attempt to purge China of counter-revolutionaries. After decades of isolation, Beijing took steps to open the country and its market up to the world. Today, China is on the podium of world-leading nations, but rapid growth has come at a cost. Cities are choked by pollution and society is strictly controlled. Behind the spectacle, authorities are hoping the pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong doesn't mar the landmark occasion for the world's longest surviving communist state.
Well, in the run-up to the big anniversary, the Chinese government has gone out of its way to make sure that no one rains on its parade. And our reporter, Alex Forrest-Whiting, is looking into that for us. Hi, Alex. They really are leaving nothing up to chance here.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they have been banning things from kites to balloons, even to pigeons, to make sure that none of these things are seen on the day, because obviously they're worried about some of those items and what could happen. But they've also been, again, clamping down on the internet. Now, we know that the internet is restricted in China anyway, but they've really decided that they need to put more controls out, including on social media platforms. So Weibo, which is a very popular Chinese social media platform, is being restricted, and its owners are playing ball with that. And in fact, on the 3rd of September, the Weibo launched its own cleanup operation, promising that it would delete any accounts or posts that distort the history of the party and the country, insult our heroic martyrs, or spread harmful political information. And just a few days ago, Weibo announced that so far that cleanup operation has been successful. More than 33,500 posts on the platform have been deleted and almost 2,000 accounts closed down. And the company is promising to continue that crackdown.
How's this being received by the Chinese?
Well, there has been a little bit of concern about this on social media, but remember, this is mainland China and people don't really like to be seen to be criticising anything to do with the government. But perhaps the most interesting post on Weibo came from the editor-in-chief of the Global Times. Now, that's the state-run run Chinese propaganda mouthpiece, really. And that editor-in-chief, who's called Hu Jin, said on Weibo, National Day is coming and accessing outside networks has become extremely difficult, affecting our work here at the Global Times. I personally feel this is a bit over the top. And he went on to say that the country isn't fragile, so China should allow a narrow opening to access outside networks. But almost as quickly as he had posted that message, it was then deleted. So wasn't really there to be seen for that long.
Seems like Beijing really is worried about anything getting in the way of this anniversary.
Yeah, and I think that they are concerned not just about the protests in Hong Kong. There's also a lot of focus on what's going on with the Uyghurs in the northwest of China. There's this upcoming presidential election in Taiwan. They've got the ongoing battle with the US over trade. So they've got a lot of things they're concerned about. And I think what they want more than anything is to see loyalty. So they've now launched an app, which is like a propaganda app, telling people, Chinese, that they need to learn all about the teaching of President Xi Jinping and Marxism, and even now going as far as saying not only should journalists be versed in that, but that they have to sit an exam in order to keep their press accreditation. Otherwise, they lose it. So it just goes to show how seriously China is taking this, and that they're not particularly concerned about what people think about press freedom in that country.
All right, very interesting. Our reporter Alex Forrest Whiting with us. Thank you. And we will have more on the story and what impact this summer's protests in Hong Kong are having on the anniversary in about 20 minutes' time on DW News Asia. Let's get a roundup now of some other stories making news around the world. At least one person has died in a fire at an overcrowded migrant camp on the Greek island of Lesbos. The blaze sparked riots among residents who said authorities were too slow to respond. Reports of a second fatality have not been confirmed. World leaders have joined thousands of mourners to pay their respects to former French President Jacques Chirac. A national day of mourning is underway. French President Emmanuel Macron led the tributes with a military ceremony in the morning before a memorial service at the Saint-Sulpice in Paris, attended by Vladimir Putin and also Bill Clinton. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is denying allegations that he touched a female employee inappropriately 20 years ago. A newspaper columnist claimed that Johnson squeezed her thigh during a lunch. Johnson has also defended himself over reports that he gave special treatment to a close friend and businesswoman during his time as London mayor. You're watching DW News. Still to come on our show, 30 years ago, a dream came true for thousands of Germans fleeing the communist East. We look back at the event that changed the course of history. And find out why the opening weekend of the World Athletics Championships in Qatar has got people hot under the collar. But first, in Austria, former Chancellor Sebastian Kurz and his Conservative People's Party are looking to build a coalition government after winning the biggest share of the vote in a general election on Sunday. Kurz is set to return to power. His party secured 37% of the vote. That's not enough to govern alone. Kurz served as Chancellor until May, when his government collapsed over a scandal involving his far-right coalition partners, the Freedom Party. They saw a dramatic slump in votes yesterday. And let's go right to DW's Max Hoffman. He is in Vienna for us. Hi, Max. You've been talking to voters there in Vienna. How do they see last night's result?
We tried to feel the wind of change on the streets of Vienna. Now, you have to keep in mind before watching those sound bites that we collected that this really isn't the place where people vote for the right-wing Freedom Party. That's outside of Vienna, outside of the big cities. That's where the strongholds are for the far-right Freedom Party. We tried to look for supporters of the Freedom Party to have it balanced, but we didn't find any here. Still, very interesting what these people had to say. Take a listen.
I'm disappointed about the Social Democrats' result. I'd wanted them to do better. I'm happy about the Greens, and yes, I've found what's been happening with populism in Austria and Europe quite difficult.
I had been hoping for the Greens or the Liberals, but thank God in the end the far right lost.
It's alarming. It really is. I'm glad the Greens are back in Parliament, but
it still doesn't sit right with me, because the right-wing populist parties still have so much power, and nobody really understands what Sebastian Kurz really did.
Honestly, it's great. Exactly what I was hoping for. And I'm now curious about coalitions and what the coalition talks will bring.
What about that coalition building, Max? Sebastian Kurz has to form a government now. What are his options?
Sebastian Kurz kept all his options open before the elections, but you're right. Now, of course, he will have to choose. And one option is his former coalition party, the Freedom Party, but they have already announced that it would prefer to be part of the opposition. For them, it's about rebuilding the party, about rebooting the party. They want to focus on internal compliance. As you know, they're scandal-ridden. They have huge corruption problems, and they want to get rid of that to get back into politics afterwards. Second option, Social Democrats, with their worst result in the history of the Austrian Social Democrats. So that might get them inclined to being part of a government to increase their relevance. On the other side, they're very far away of Sebastian Kurz's policy, especially in social policy matters. So experts here in Vienna think that is not very likely either. And that leaves us with the surprise winner of Sunday, with the Greens. Mathematically, it would work between the Austrian People Party of Sebastian Kurz and the Greens. People didn't really anticipate that happening. They probably would be quite close together on certain issues, but just like with the Social Democrats, it might be difficult with social policy. Nevertheless, here in Vienna, most people think this is the most likely coalition.
Yeah, mathematically, Max, it could work. How about practically? How would this coalition with the Greens work?
Yeah, let me get into that and those details a little more. I already mentioned climate policy, economic policy. So this would all be green economics. You could imagine them coming together there. A very difficult topic, though, would be migration. Sebastian Kurz, known for his hard line, the Greens not so much. And then social policy, Sebastian Kurz wants to cut taxes, the Greens want to invest in that area. So it would take them some time to align those positions, most definitely.
DW's Max Hoffman for us in Vienna. Thank you. Volkswagen is in court in Germany today. The car maker is facing a huge lawsuit over the diesel emissions scandal. Hundreds of thousands of diesel drivers have teamed up to demand compensation for the VW cars that they bought. The lawsuit is the first of its kind in Germany. Lawmakers paved the way for class action proceedings after the diesel scandal broke in 2015.
This could be a watershed moment for Germany's legal system. 4 years after the emissions scandal broke, hundreds of thousands of diesel drivers now have the chance to hold the car maker to account. It's the first ever class action lawsuit to take place in the country. Similar actions in the United States have seen consumers come away with billions of dollars in compensation.
We're
confident about winning. The arguments speak for themselves. Volkswagen cheated. The leaders knew about things from the start. And VW hasn't put forward anything substantial that can contradict that. Volkswagen's lawyers maintain that the car maker has removed the emissions cheating devices and argue that diesel owners cannot claim for compensation while continuing to drive the offending vehicles. To this day, hundreds of thousands of vehicles are still in use by customers. For us, this means that there's no damage and therefore no reason for compensation. Monday's hearing comes just a week after German prosecutors charged 3 VW executives, including current boss Herbert Diess, with market manipulation, accusing them of failing to inform shareholders about the financial impact of the emissions scandal. A further indication that the costs of Germany's biggest post-war industrial scandal are still being counted.
Now to some other headlines from around the world. In Moscow, authorities have scrapped a prison sentence for actor Pavel Ustinov after a public outcry. Ustinov had been given 3.5 years for assaulting a police officer during a protest, but authorities backtracked after footage emerged showing security officials beating him. He's been given a 1-year suspended sentence instead. And 8 members of an alleged neo-Nazi terror cell have gone on trial in the eastern German city of Dresden. The men are accused of planning attacks targeting immigrants, political opponents, and journalists. The trial is set to last until April of next year. "30 years ago, thousands of East Germans fleeing communism made their way to the Czechoslovakian capital, Prague. Their destination was the West German embassy there. They were hoping to use it as a staging point to get to freedom in West Germany. Their gamble paid off, and on the 30th of September 1989, they packed onto trains heading west. 3 decades later, some of them have been retracing their steps.
A journey back in time. 30 years ago, Hilmar Zander was travelling in a train just like this one.
It's like it's like reliving it all over again.
Back then, Zander was one of thousands of refugees fleeing East Germany. They travelled in special trains from Prague to the west. But to get there, they had to pass through East German territory, where they feared they'd be arrested. In order to keep memories of those journeys alive, some of the people who made those trips then are doing it again. They all left East Germany that way. After several tense weeks in the West German embassy in Prague. In September 1989, East Germans were pouring into the embassy. The building was quickly overwhelmed. Many ended up camping out in the embassy grounds. It was cold. Zander spent 3 weeks here with his wife and 2 children. New arrivals came in over the fence every day.
It never stopped raining. They put down boards so you didn't have to walk through the mud. People put up their tents wherever they could find a space. The tents were all crowded up against one another.
Then the fateful moment. On the 30th of September, West German Foreign Minister Hans-Dietrich Genscher arrived. Speaking to the refugees from the balcony, his announcement that they could leave was drowned out by cheers. Genscher promised that everyone in the embassy would be allowed to go to the west. Zander was there and heard him.
We were standing right here. It's all coming back.
That same night, Zander and his family left the embassy and boarded the train to West Germany.
It was a very emotional journey. Very difficult. But for us, it was a train to freedom.
Just a few weeks later, all the citizens of East Germany gained their freedom. On November 9th, 1989, the Berlin Wall came down.
Sports now, and the World Athletics Championships in Qatar have been dominated by empty seats in the stands and athletes complaining about the heat. Organizers say they have done all that they can to mitigate the effects of the high temperatures and to get in more spectators. But it does not bode well for the Football World Cup in Qatar in 2022.
The women's 100 meters is always a crowd magnet. You'd think the World Athletics Championships in Doha would be no different. Jamaica's Shelly Ann Fraser-Price is the fastest woman on the planet, but few fans came out to see her victory. Take a look at the thousands of empty seats behind her. Poor attendance is just one concern. Heat and high humidity are also big problems. The women's marathon on Saturday had to start at midnight to avoid daytime high temperatures of 38 degrees Celsius. Still, the heat on the streets of Doha was unbearable. 28 of the 68 runners failed to finish. Many required medical attention. It was the slowest marathon winning time ever at the World Championships. The men's 50-kilometer walk had similar issues, with France's world record holder Johan Denys having to drop out.
I have trouble talking. I'm short of breath. My legs are finished. I feel my head starting to spin.
For those competing inside the stadium, things aren't as bad. Organizers are trying to do everything to keep the athletes cool. Air-conditioned stadiums are also planned for the 2022 Football World Cup, despite objections from environmentalists.
The air conditioning works similar to your car air conditioning. So you pull air from outside, you pass through a cold media, and then after that the air will lose its heat and then go directly to the stadium to be cooled.
But even the promise of an air-conditioned stadium has not attracted bigger crowds. If the Doha Athletics
little to celebrate. Hong Kong protesters are feeling anything but patriotic in the run-up to China's 70th anniversary. But in Beijing, they're putting on the finishing touches ahead of one of the biggest celebrations the country will ever see. Virish Banerjee has those stories and more coming right up on DW News Asia. Stay with us.
What does an Artlist subscription cover? Well,